So, dear learners, I welcome today's session. So, I welcome to Dr. Mohanty. So, no doubt it's a excellent experience because before this we had never tried for this online counseling session. So, we are believing on offline or face-to-face interaction. Due to this pandemic, this is the lockdown. So, it's getting a immense opportunity to interact each other through this Google Meet, sitting in our own home. You are interacting each other. So it's a true sense the digital mode or the distance education is, you are depend upon the multimedia approach or the technology, it is going to success. So I do feel all learners should enjoy this, online counseling classes. So I don't want to take much time. So straight away welcome to ma'am to today's session. So I will hand over the session to ma'am. We can continue your presentation, ma'am.
Good afternoon, one and all. Today I will continue our discussion that we had in our last class, that is on Hinduism. And what I was trying to say last class, we already discussed that how Hinduism is an ideology, and at the same time it's a way of life, and how the dichotomy between Sanskritic and non-Sanskritic practices there's that exists, and we had a discussion on Sanskritization. And today I would just begin with the note that whenever people talk about religion, apart from being an ideology, apart from being a way of life, one of the major essence of religion is that it gives you an identity of belonging to a religious group, of having certain beliefs and practices. So perhaps we tend to look at religion from that point of view. And whenever we talk about Hinduism, there's also this idea of identity also is an important component of it. Then I'll take up a discussion on the idea of monotheism and religion, and as to where does a monotheistic and a monolithic concept of religion stand, and when we try to make a comparison between a polytheistic religion where we see multiplicity of gods, and it's laced with kinds of worship. Sometimes we worship spirits, we worship material objects, sometimes we worship nature, as you saw in nature is a, or when you, if even if you talk about totemism, or there are multiple ways, there are multiple factors of worshiping. And here you will see that mostly what we do in this kind of a religion, we tend to make the gods or the spirit, they are more or less, we give them a human form. They are anthropomorphized, in the sense that, we either we talk about male gods and female gods. And if you try to make a comparison with the previous set of religions that we were discussing prior to this, you will see that, for example, in Christianity or in Islam, we never indulged in any kind of idol worship. Here we take up idol, and these idols are given a human form, basically a masculine and a feminine form. But there, we were actually worshipping certain, certain symbols, certain archetypal motifs. So that is how is the idea of these two kind of religions they differ. And another thing you will see that in this monotheistic kind of religion, the supernatural power, it's mostly conceived as a male power, because when you talk about the idea of God in Christianity, for example, Jesus was the father, sorry, was the son of God, and he was addressing all his followers as son. So, and even in Islam, Muhammad was the again was a male figure. So basically, in mostly in this monotheistic concept, you will find a masculine gender. And as I told you, religion is always gendered, and beyond that, this supernatural power that we talk about, it's always manifested in certain kind of masculine, feminine gender. So you talk about Sakti, the Sakti cult, it's a feminine gender, and it appears, as an interface between the savage and the civilized. When we are talking about, the kind of evolutionism, when religion they take, an evolutionary forum, and that's where we tend to locate Hinduism. And if you look at some of the basic, what do you say, core ideas of Hinduism, you all must be acquainted with it. For example, the Purusartha, the concept of the Purusartha. And as I told you, it's an ideology, and this ideology is based on certain realities of man's existence. Again, I'm sorry for using the term man, I'm using it in a generic sense rather than in a gender sense. You will see that there are certain ultimate, what you see, ultimate goals of life, and these purusarthas, the four purusarthas that we talk about, they are trying to attain these goals, and the kind of hierarchy exists among these goals. So on the top, on the highest rung of this hierarchy stands dharma, and that is considered to be the most prestigious one, because as a human being we all are supposed to follow our dharma. And second, after dharma is artha, which means wealth, uh, kama, which means your desires, and moksha. Moksha is the ultimate, what do you say, ultimate aim of Hinduism. And if you look at this concept of dharma, you will see that it has it's replete everywhere, all over Hindu literature. Or you talk about the epics like Ramayana and Mahabharata, where they place so much of emphasis on this concept of dharma, and you will see that there is in the, for example, in the Vedic period, dharma actually pertain to certain, what you say, certain moral laws, certain kind of duties. Uh, Please mute your microphones. And certain, what you say, certain customs, and the very idea of what is right and wrong. So dharma would carry actually two connotations. One, that would stand for the natural order of a phenomena, and second, it would be the obligation of a human being. When you say that what is your dharma as a human being, the kind of duty that you need to have towards yourself, towards your fellow human beings, towards animals, towards the society, towards the universe, towards this entire cosmic order. So it's dharma is not something which is completely social in nature. This is how you relate to each other, relate to your own self, relate to the cosmic reality, relate to the ultimate almighty, relate to other organisms, whoever it is. So in Hinduism, dharma is quite a vast concept. It's an umbrella term in that way. And the second component is artha. Artha, we all know that it means wealth. Dhana, যেটাকে আমি ধন্য কহু. And it is mostly used in a common parlance. We use it for money. কার পাখে কেতে ধন্য ଅଛି. And it's actually a very wrong conception to think that Hinduism is completely otherworldly. कि नहीं माने Hinduism जमा धन अर्जनरे से जमा विश्वास रखेनी. And in fact, Artha is an important component when we talk about this Purusartha, because it's all about attaining those worldly prosperity that a human being needs to remain happy, because Hinduism believes that as a human being, just conducting your dharma, for doing your dharma also you need artha, you need certain wealth, you need certain material riches, you need property, you need certain kind of, you need money. And in a broad sense, these are these tangible objects which you need to possess for say for raising a good family. I cannot actually conduct my dharma of being a good father or good mother if I don't have dharma. So that's how, it's all interrelated, and we tend to take up each purusartha and they are hierarchically ordered. And at the same time, you will find that these purusarthas, they are not mutually exclusive. They are actually intertwined into each other. So in Hinduism, we never believe that it's poverty is a kind of a virtue. No, we believe that poverty and hunger are those two vices which can actually you know push a man to commit some certain crime or some kind of sin. So if you need to stick to your dharma, you have to also have certain wealth with you. And by having certain wealth, it doesn't mean I'll just lead a life for procuring wealth for the sake of wealth. It has to be, as I told you, intertwined with other aspects of the purusartha. And even some Chanakya also believed that wealth is actually an important aspect of life, and again it has to be intertwined with dharma. And the next one is kama. Kama is like it's the sexual gratification. It's a drive for your desires, and it is considered to be the lowest forms of the purusartha. If you try to rank it, the rank comes at the third place. And but at the same time, if you look at this thing, you will see that it's actually, karma is considered to be lust. It's the kind of sensuous enjoyment, and it's always considered to be a kind of obstruction to one's spiritual progress. But but you will see that karma is it's the basis of a socially regulated behavior like marriage. And whenever we are talking about the grihastha ashrama, that the ashrama system which we'll be discussing further, that is when one reaches the stage of a householder, it's quite crucial in that stage, and it's one of the necessities. And as I told you, apart from karma cannot be taken in isolation. It has to be taken along with other purusarthas. And in order to have a perfect life, in order to have the complete Hindu way of life, one needs to be in dharma, to earn wealth and to have karma. These three together, they can actually bring in that the Hindu way of life in a perfect manner. And you know, uh, somebody like Gokhale, he's of the opinion that Artha is a good source of fulfilling the desires and needs of karma, for good food, for having, the desires of wearing good clothes, for putting on, ornaments. These are, preeminent sources of karma, and you can only fulfill your karma unless and until you have artha. So, when you talk about the importance of wife in a grahastha ashrama, you will see that the entire man-woman relationship is expressed through karma, and that's how we tend to align these three purusarthas together. And coming to moksha, which is the highest and most sought after purusartha, it is the ultimate purusartha. Literally, it means freedom, and it stands for freedom from this sansar, or from this worldly life. And it's like your atma trying to making an attempt to mingle with the Paramatma. That is the ultimate, the ultimate goal of life. So in order to attain moksha, one can have to take up many births, and that is how Hindu Hinduism looks at the various aims of life of a human being. The next concept is asrama sanskar. So, along with the four goals of life, that is Guru Sartha, we also have four ashramas. That is, ashramas are nothing but four stages in a man's life. I keep telling man because the focus was mostly on man being, religion being a patriarchal institution. And here you will see that. When I'm talking about these four stages in a man's life, they are. It's considered that a man would live for 100 years, and it's divided into four spans accordingly, with each span having 25 years with it. So it begins with brahmacharya, that is the stage where you're trying to acquire knowledge, and that is the stage of studentship where acquiring knowledge is would be a dharma. The next step would be what you say grahastha asrama, which is the state that is meant to earn. That is, you have to pursue, you have to take on this pursuit for artha and kama. So they constitute the major aspect in a grahastha asrama. Then with Vanaprastha, you tend to, gradually retire, leaving the reins of your family up to the next generation. And with Sannyasa, you almost take complete renunciation. You renunciate your family, your village, your caste, your life partner. So that's what sannyasa is all about, and they constitute the four stages in a man's life. And if you see that, if you talk about the sanskaras, they are the stages into which a man evolves into. You start with brahmacharya and you end with sannyasa, and among within these four stages, you are actually trying to fulfill the goals that has been given to you by the Purusarthas. So every stage has its own goal. So, in the first stage, you are trying to have your dharma. Dharma is a state, is a goal which is pertinent all through the four stages. Because with every stage, your dharma keeps changing, but you have certain goals to attain. When you talk about artha, that comes mostly artha and kama in the second stage, and by third and fourth stage, you are getting ready for the ultimate goal, that is moksha. And apart from this, whenever we talk about dharma, you will see that there is this concept of Raj Dharma. Uh, Raj Dharma is, it actually denotes to governance, and here it's like trying to bridge a relationship between the ruler and the ruled in a very proper, righteous way. So when we say that in Raj Dharma there are, we talk about,
Hello, madam.
yes,
Hello.
yes,
How many stages are there?
what stages you are talking about asrama system? Oh,
Like number one is dharma, number two karma.
they are not
Kama.
dharma. That is not stages. That is actually the goals. That is the goals of a Hindu life.
Okay,
There
okay,
are
okay.
four goals of a life, of your life. And you have dharma, you have karma, you have artha, you have moksha. These are goals. Then
Okay,
stages
okay.
are there. And in every stage, you have to attain these goals.
Okay, okay, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So, whenever we talk about Raj Dharma, it is about, the concept of righteous governance, the relationship that exists between the ruler and the ruled. And that's an important component of, in a political state. Whenever we talk about the political scenario, we always talk about Raj Dharma. That is your relationship with the state, and as a subject or as a citizen or as a member of the society, how do you pertain to carry out your Rajdhan. Then there is this concept of Uttam Purus. Uttam Purus, it's like the ideal man. That's the highest form of ideology that one tends to attain. That is the most perfect man, and we have this concept, and this concept pertains to the person who is actually quite pertinent in carrying out the purusarthas, and taking up the stages of life in a very perfect way. Then, we almost talk about dharmachara complex in Hinduism. Uh, Whenever we talk about what is actually achara. I mean, I don't mean pickle, but it's a kind of behavior, the kind of behavior that you display. So, primarily, when you talk about dharma, you will see that your dharma is always related with dharmachar. That is, as an individual, you are related to your your village. You can be related to your lineage, to your kinship system, to your caste group, to your country, that is desa, or to your loka, to your sastras. So as an individual, you have, it's a multiple kind of a multi-layered relationship that you tend to attain. And whenever we talk about this achar, it is like achar, it is like a conduct, it's a behavior where you are trying to conduct yourself, you are having certain practices, and in this entire way you are trying to stay righteous, you are trying to attain the attain all the goals that has been bestowed on you, and that becomes the primary goal of your life. And that's how we say that whenever you talk about this behavior which pertains to one's dharma, then at the same time you have the kulachar, that is as a person where you have certain allegiance towards your kula. It encompasses your marriage, your family. It extends onto your kinship, your caste, and that is how we say that that behavior was not kulachar. For example, in North India, or even in eastern parts of India, marriage among the cousins is prohibited, but in South India it is accepted. So if you have the same practice here, it will be a non kulachar behavior. But for them, it would be for us it would be a violation of our achar, that is our behavior towards our food. But for them, it would not be. So similarly, we have certain kind of behavior towards the gotra, towards the jat, towards the caste that we belong to. So this is how Hinduism has actually specified all kinds of behavioral nuances, and that's the reason we always say that it's a way of life. If you make a comparison between Hinduism and other monotheistic religions that we discussed in the previous classes, you will see that they have certain guidelines, which is documented and quoted, that for example, in Christianity, as a staunch Christian or a Catholic, you need to do these practices. Hinduism actually doesn't talk in terms of certain strict mandatory practices, but it's actually it tries to give you a framework for leading a perfect life. So it is all about at what stage what you need to do, what goals you need to achieve, and in what context how do you behave as an individual, how do you relate to your society, how do you relate to your family, how do you relate to your community. So it is an what I would say, it's a umbrella term in that way, because it's actually a bundle of practices and behavioral norms that it suggests you as a Hindu. So basically, it's not like any other religion where we have to take up certain strict ritualistic practices. It is basically about a way of life. very short. That was about Hinduism. Now I will take up some important concepts that we need to understand in the context of religion, since this paper is about religion, and mostly we are faced with another concept, that is secularism, and the very process, that is secularization, which we always believe that it is completely antithetical to religion. But that is not the case. We will try to discuss, about the origin, the historicity of this context, and how, in the Indian context, the different dimensions that has got associated with this concept. I told you earlier that, whenever we talk about sociology as a discipline, we always believe that it's a study that attempts to look at modern societies. And whenever we are talking about modernity, secularism makes another one of the most important components of a modern society. We have to define modernity in certain way. Whenever we talk about a modern society, we have to relate it with industrialization. We have to relate it with democracy. We have to relate it with certain kind of rights. So secularism is one such component of modernity, and mostly you will see that we always believe when we you might have read in your initial classes that it was sociology as a discipline, it resulted out of three revolutions, and with every revolution, our the there was a restructuring of our life. I told you that with industrialization, industrial revolution, it brought a complete restructuring to the economic aspect of life. French Revolution restructured the political aspects of life. And then there was Reformation, Renaissance, the final stage was Enlightenment. Enlightenment was, looking into certain social ethos, certain values that which we had completely rejected or which we had uncritically accepted. We started challenging them. And secularism actually it emerged, during the it was a post Reformation concept. If you look at this, the etymological origin of this term, it's a Latin word, and saculum. It came from this word saculum, which means century or age. So basically, we can relate this term to the time period. Whenever we are talking about the temporality, that is the time frame, we normally tend to hierarchize it. We talk about the sacred times, we talk about the profane times. For example, in Hinduism, we have the Satya Yuga, the Treta Yuga, the Kali Yuga. So we tend to hierarchize things. Ki Satya Yuga is samasta Satya Gautami. We had a certain kind of hierarchy. So similarly, you will find these kind of hierarchies in Christianity as well. You will find it everywhere. So secularism, it's actually it relates. If you take a look at the etymological meaning, it relates to the profane time. You know that is not sacred, and the time it was, it, yeah. Please mute your microphone. Yeah. So whenever we talk about this concept, normally this term was coined around 1851 by George Jacob Halioke, and this person, being somebody from a socialist background, he highlighted some of the end products of enlightenment. What did enlightenment talk about? Enlightenment talk about the idea, the power of reason. It said that as free thinking adults, we have this ability to reason, and again we need to have a scientific temper in our life, so we may not succumb ourselves to any kind of authority. be it as religious authority, a political authority, or any kind of authoritarian system. So basically it was focusing on individualism, that as an individual you are precious because you have the ability to think, you have the ability to reason out. So it's somehow it started articulating the idea of freedom, a free individual. Who can be a free individual? A free individual who is able to think, who can attain the highest potential of his life by free thinking, and not by subjugating himself or herself to any kind of authority. I will accept the authority on the basis of my reason. I will not simply accept the authority because it is written in some sacred text, so-called sacred text, or because my family wants me to do this. I would like to do it. I will have try to reason out this thing, that whether it is good for me. So every individual has this capacity, and the final stage, that is the enlightenment was actually talking about the highest form of human capacity, empowering the human being with this individualism, that as a human being you have this autonomy of reason. You can reason out things and you can challenge any kind of authority. And in that context, secularism would emerge as a byproduct, because when I say that, I am not going to accept any religious authority just because my predecessors have been doing that. No, I will try to reason it out. I will not think that okay, there is some supernatural belief into it, or there is some superstitions associated with it. My mind is different from my modern mind is different from the medieval mind, because now I have a scientific temper. For everything I calculate, I plan, I apply scientific principles. So secularism was a byproduct of all these things, because when science and secularism, they were going hand in hand. And Polio K, he came up with certain terms like mythism and limitationalism, where he was trying to talk about, when by limitationalism, he was trying to say that, that religion, the influence of religion needs to be limited. And that is how, he was trying to promote that the autonomy of a person, the dignity of a person, it actually comes in a secular way of life, because that is where you can enjoy ultimate freedom. So when you talk about defining this concept again, it has certain multi-layered definitions. There are three dimensions to it. To talk about defining this concept. One is that it is a people-centric definition. It has a people-centric definition. Second, it has a state-centric definition. And third is it's India-specific. When I say that it's a people-centered definition, the emphasis mostly is on the idea of separating religion from politics, from economy, from education. So by secular we mean when the state doesn't interfere in the religion. It's not that the state doesn't only interfere, but at the same time you will see that religion as a sphere and politics as a sphere are completely separate. They have simply no relationship with each other. And that has never happened actually in the previous stages. I told you, I think in the previous classes, I was trying to say that I don't know if you have heard it or not, or I don't know if I told it in this class of sociology of religion or in the diaspora class, but I remember telling that. You think about the English church, or you think about the hegemony of Jagannath cult, you will see that the relationship between religion and politics has always been there. In those stages, that is in the pre-modern times, before this stage of reformation, renaissance, enlightenment, and or whenever you're talking about French Revolution and Industrial Revolution, in the pre-modern times, we believe that religion had a deep influence on politics. It was the religious leaders who would dictate the king as to what needs to be done and what is religious and what is irreligious. So they used to intervene in the policies, in the policy making whenever we talk about the king. And what is this reformation actually? Reformation, if you look at history, there are so many literature in popular culture, so many movies on this phase of reformation, that the division between in the Christianity came with these two sects of Catholicism and Protestantism, and the ones who actually supported the church, they became the Catholics, and those who were actually supporting the monarch became the Protestant. And that is how the Protestantism started as a more liberal form of religion. And even in the context of Odisha, you will see that there are so many literature on the tussle between the kings of Puri and the priests of Jagannath temple, because the priest always had this legitimacy of religion. They would say that हाँ मते भगवान स्वप्ने छंती आउ एटा एटा हबो आउ जदि तमे न सुनिबो you will face the music, because people always believed in religion, and they had the legitimacy. In order to win over the legitimacy of the people, every ruler, they had to take these religious priests into confidence. So the tussle was always there. ମଝିରେ ଏମିତି ଗୋଟେ ପେଜରେ କିଛିଟା ପୁରୀ ରାଜା ମାନେ ସେମାନେ ଅନ୍ୟ Saivism କୁ ଅନ୍ୟ cults କୁ they shifted, because they were too very frustrated with this powerful influence of the priests. So the tussle between religion and politics has always been there. And apart from that, whenever you talk about economy, whenever you talk about education, there can be a religious angle. For example, today, there is this idea of talk, this very debate and controversy over accepting degrees from madrasa. We believe that madrasas uh, try to propagate certain religious ideas, and it cannot be compared to the modern degree that you achieve. So that's the reason, whenever there is an interference of religion into the education sphere, in the economic sphere, or in your cultural sphere, that's where secularism ceases. So the first definition of secularism, which is people centric, would say that these spheres, they are all separate institutions. Your education system shouldn't propagate a particular religion, or you shouldn't talk about a particular religion, or your economy shouldn't be guided by certain religious principles. ମୁଁ କହିବି କି ନାଇଁ ଏଇ କାମଟା ଖରାପ, ଆମ economic system ରେ ଆମେ ଏଇ ପ୍ରକାର କାମ we will not take up because the sacred text actually denounces them. So no, you have to have a free thinking mind. So that's what that was the product of enlightenment. So we have to keep all these institutions separate. And whenever we are talking about the separation of religion from other institutions, we actually at the same time we say that it's a secular state now. We talk about secularism, and a secular state doesn't necessarily discourage the practice of religion, but it would say that the policies of that state cannot be based on a particular religion. So religion is a complete personal affair. ତମେ ତମ ଘରେ କଣ ପୂଜା କରୁଛ, କଣ ଇଏ କରୁଛ, the state need not bother, and you need not bother the state. So that is how we started talking about secularism from a people-centric perspective. Whenever we talk about secularism from a state-centric perspective, you will see that the emphasis is to keep keep the state neutral from religions, all kind of religions. So religious people would like to see that the state should, show certain regard to particular faiths, or try to have certain respect, but here the state needs to maintain a certain kind of a neutrality without showing a tilt to any kind of religion. So that is the reason. The reason is that irrespective of your religious backgrounds that you belong to, the state is trying to treat all its citizens equally. And This means that the state must neither favor or discriminate against any individual or any citizen on the basis of his or her religion. So that is how we talk about state-centric religion. Whenever we talk about the third idea of secularism, that is in the context of India. You know, if we will be discussing about it in the later part of this class, I will discuss further. As I told you that if you talk about secularism from a Western European point of view, it has a different connotation. ତାଙ୍କ କେସରେ secularism କୁ ଗୋଟେ evolve କଲା because of the Reformation phase, the Renaissance, Enlightenment was gradually evolving. uh, with us, as I told you, modernity was it came to us as a song. Hঠাৎ, colonialism came, and along with colonialism, we started, experiencing certain um, modern institutions. And whenever we talk about, the Indian idea, you will see that. We always believe that it's the unity of people. Our secularism actually came from the idea of unity of people, irrespective of their caste, their religion, their cultural diversity. That we should stand united against colonialism, against any form of communalism as well. Because that's what we started having this slogan that unity lies in diversity. Because if you talk about the history of nationalism in Europe or any other society, any other state, you will see that for nationalism they had a common cultural basis. Either ଗୋଟେ common language କହୁଥିଲେ, ଗୋଟେ common religion ଥିଲା, କିଛି ଗୋଟେ commonality ଥିଲା. But you talk about a country like India, ଯୋଉଥିରେ 1200 କେତେଟା language ଅଛି, ଯୋଉଥିରେ ଏତେ ଗୋଟେ ଧର୍ମ ଅଛି, and difficult to enlist them. How do I talk about a common background for nationalism? So we started talking about unity in diversity, and our unity basis thila je we have to fight colonialism. So it was, we were talking about secularism for us was like, it emerged on those backgrounds. And if you talk about the Indian state, it was, we had a vision of a secular state during the Indian nationalist movement itself. And we always wanted to avoid, but it was inevitable that the partisan came up, and that came up with religious lines. That was unfortunate, but that's the reason I always say that when you make a comparison between European modernity and Indian modernity, you will see that with the nationalism, which is again another component of modernity, it comes with secularism. But for in our case, we had nationalism and we had communalism. So Indian experience of modernity was quite different. So whenever we talk about secularism also, we have different dimensions to this entire concept. Now, talking about this process of secularization, you will see that whenever we talk about secularization as a process, we believe that religion as an institution is actually retiring or withdrawing its influences on certain uh, institutions and from human consciousness as well. You will see that for example, Brian Wilson. Wilson defines secularization that it's a process in which social institutions gain considerable autonomy and religious consciousness declines. So instead of being, the pervasive determinant influence, religion becomes a department of social order. So, we just take religion as an aspect of life. It's not all pervasive. There is autonomy. Whenever you talk about politics, whenever you talk about economy, whenever you talk about education, every institution has its own autonomy, and religion as such it also has its own autonomy. But that was not the case earlier. The case in the pre-modern times it was completely different. So you will see that, please mute your microphone. Yeah, thank you. So, whenever we talk about secularization as a process, secularization came, with certain degree of rationalization. I think you have by this time you have already read Weber, and you are quite thorough with his concept of rationalization, and how he says that every institution actually undergoes a process of rationalization. So that is how, we are in a process of rationalizing each and every social institution, and industrialization and urbanization actually added to this idea of secularization, because it was within an industrial context that, we started setting up our feelings. For example, when you try to work in an industrial setup in a factory system, there is an intensive division of labor. The setting is completely impersonal. सेठी मु देखुनी कि जे अच्छा से को रिलीजन रे से को जाति रे से बेसिस रे मु ये करूँगी. I just have to, job has to be done, and I may have to, team up with different people at different point of time. So, and urbanization at the same time, when you are withdrawing from the belts, the rural belts, and from the extensive uh, family, and you are, setting up apart from these institutions, it actually has a lot to, contribute to this process of secularization. Peter Berger. Peter Berger, he defined it as a process by which sectors of society and culture are removed from the domination of religious institutions and symbols. एठी जब भी मु I always believe, please suppose ଯଦି ତମ କୌଣସି ଗଭର୍ଣ୍ଣମେଣ୍ଟ ଅଫିସରେ you don't see କି କୋଉଠି ଗୋଟେ ଭଗବାନଙ୍କର ଫଟୋ ଲାଗିଛି କି କୋଉଠି ଗୋଟେ ତ୍ରିଶୂଳ ଲାଗିଛି, that's not the case. You have a national flag जोटा कि आमे पुणी खाली किछटा occasion रे लगेई परिबा. That is a secular symbol. It's not a religious symbol. Similarly, I will say that even religious institution, I always believe that, whenever we talk about any religious institution, सेतबेले आमे पूजा करूछु, गणेश पूजा करछु कि सरस्वती पूजा करछु, it's not actually a secular practice. जदि करबा आमे सब जगह पूजा करबा. If not, it's again not it could be but a puja ta a secular form rahi pare, but giving it a religious connotation would be a bit problematic. So basically, if you look at this process actually has triggered certain important changes, and it has minimalized the role of religion in political and social affairs. And the important processes of change that was triggered by secularization, which went along with modernity, was number one, as I told you earlier, withdrawal of religion from social spheres, as education, any kind of marriage. For example, education system रे एबे तुमको यूनिवर्सिटीज रे कि इग्नो तुमको एबे बिकॉज़ यू आर ए हिंदू तुमको वेद उपनिषद पढ़ो. What is a standardized text that is that is being regulated by a body like UGC, से सेटा take up करके पढ़ुची. So no religion actually can dictate an education institution. For example, marriage, you want to marry somebody from another religious community, the Indian constitution gives complete permission to it. So it starts withdrawing its influence. हुएता गोटे जोटा secular state नुह सेथरे permission hey na thata. For example, talk about West Asian countries, Saudi Arabia है ना. If you marry a non-Muslim, maybe tankara death penalty पर्यंत भी tankara punishment jai paruchi, which is there in their constitution, which is completely legal and completely codified law in their society. So that's not a secular state, but ours is a secular state. लोक कौन कहिबे घरे allow करूछन्ते न करूछन्ते, that's a different thing, but the law, the state allows that. So that's what the withdrawal of religion from other aspects of social aspects. Then another change that was development of pluralism. We started talking about social groups. We started talking about different worldviews. କିଏ କାହାକୁ ମାନି ପାରିବ ଗୋଟେ plural society because whenever we talk about a modern society the appearance of a plural multicultural society is actually harmonious coexistence and mutual respect for each other. And you are giving respect to the culture of that group, the religion of that group, and in turn you are coexisting. Pluralism, tabi gote secularization na gote process. It's an end product of secularization. If secularization na hoitanta, pluralism no thanta because gote particular state jem tame कहबो कि जदि ना एठी खाली हिंदूस रहबे केडी खाली मुस्लिम्स रहबे अन्य माने पळा सेठी प्लूरल गोटे प्लूरल मल्टीकल्चरल सोसाइटी के डेवलप करि परिबनी आ प्रत्येक प्लूरल मल्टीकल्चरल सोसाइटी रो निजर गोटे चार्म थाए निजर गोटे ब्यूटी थाए that we have to accept. Then coming to the process of rationalization, what Max Weber has talked about, तमने पढ़िथिबो भी आगु, that it refers to this emergence of a scientific rational worldview, which is completely, you're trying to distance yourself from myths, from miracles, from mysteries or any kind of magic ki acha suppose mu kahibi ki je ebe kona mu emti jodi mo dehta kharap hoche ମୁଁ କଣ କଣ ନେବି ନା ନା ଏଇ ଔଷଧ ଖାଉଛି ବିକଜ ଏଇ ଔଷଧରେ ଏଇ କମ୍ପୋନେଣ୍ଟ ଅଛି ଡକ୍ଟର ତମକୁ ବୁଝେଇ ଦଉଛି ଯେ ଏଇଟା ଖାଇଲେ ଏଇଟା ଏଇ ଜିନିଷକୁ ଆଟେଣ୍ଡ କରୁଛି ତେଣୁ ତମ ଦେହଟା ଏଇଥିପାଇଁ ଭଲ ହବ here I don't take recluse in some kind of a superstitious belief ki na mate ei ଠାକୁରାଣୀ ଭଲ କରିଦେବେ କି ମତେ ଏଇଟା ଇଏ କରିଦେଲେ that is another practice but ଏଇ ଯୋଉ rationalization ଟା suppose ମୁଁ କହିବି କି ଯେ medical field ଟା rationalized ହେଇଗଲା education as an institution rationalized ହେଇଗଲା polity your state as an institution rationalized ହେଇଗଲା जो सोसाइटी जेते तार इंस्टीट्यूशंस गुडा rationalized ହେଇ जाउचे सेटा सेते सेक्युलर ହେଇ ଯିବ that was what Max Weber was trying to refer to. Then there is this development of a critical consciousness that that believes that there are certain hidden ideologies in the institutions and belief structures of religion. Suppose religious belief structure actually kichita critical consciousness thai and that's actually hidden. So in the process of secularization we tend to get more and more critical of these things. We tend to see things in a very from a very critical position. And if you talk about this process, you will see that it has it was triggered by certain popular scientific ideas. If you go back to history, you will see that scientists like say Copernicus. You remember whenever we talked about modernity, we believed that scientific revolution was responsible in bringing about enlightenment. And a scientific revolution ta kono thila? It was nothing but the studies of certain great scientists. For example, Copernicus, who believed that our universe, our solar system is not geocentric but rather heliocentric. Geocentric माने आगु popularly लोक believe करुଥିଲେ prior to Copernicus there was this king called Ptolemy. He believed that पृथ्वीटा होचे पूरा सेंटर रे ଆମ ୟୁନିଭର୍ସ ର ସେଣ୍ଟର ରେ ପୃଥିବୀ ସବୁ ସୂର୍ଯ୍ୟ ଚନ୍ଦ୍ର ସବୁ ପୃଥିବୀ ଚାରିପଟେ ବୁଲୁଛନ୍ତି and that was that was trying to give a kind of an idea that man is very central to the divine design and when Copernicus came up with this idea ki na पृथ्वी टा actually center रे नुहे पृथ्वी is like any other planet it actually revolves around the sun it moves around the sun the church went against him sange sange he was banished and all kinds of torturous behavior was meted out to him second thile Galileo Galileo was put under house arrest ତାକୁ ପୁରା ଜୀବନଟା ଯାକ ତାଙ୍କୁ house arrest ରେ ରଖାଗଲା because he said that earth moves around the sun कि नहीं कोपर्निकस ठीक कहूଥିଲେ से ता चारिपटे बुलुची तेनो the church was like how do you go against me ତେଣୁ ଏଇଠି ଗୋଟେ division ଥିଲା between scientific community and the church and then you had coming up next scientists like Kepler who gave you the laws of motion Newton जे कि gravitational force bisare कहले जे earth ta then you had started having this idea that earth is spherical जोटा कि गोटे scientific revolution ପରେ गोटे voyage आरंभ कला which later on resulted in colonialism जो जेति की discoveries हला diaspora paper we started talking about Columbus mistakenly he took discovered America thinking that it was India because ସିଏ पढ़ी सारथिले कि जे अर्थ टा गोल मु एमिति पहुंची जिबी ईस्ट पाटे न जाय कि वेस्ट पाटे ट्रैवल करके इंडिया रे पहुंची जिबी so these scientific ideas were extremely important in bringing a secular feeling when I move to a different kind of a society. Please mute your microphones. Please mute. Please mute your microphones. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that, for example, I was talking about how scientific ideas were responsible in bringing a secular way of life. Uh, as I told you, suppose Columbus, he started traveling. So they nuwa jaga ko gale. So dekhile je, acha people are not like me. Se mane European ko bhaliya white nuhanti, e jagare loko black bhi achanti, brown color loko achanti. And at the same time, seteluku human anatomy upare bhi bahut studies heଇ sarchi. And it said ki all human beings are same. ତାଙ୍କର blood group ଚାରି ପ୍ରକାରର ସେ ଗୋରା ହଉଛନ୍ତି କଳା ହଉଛନ୍ତି anatomy ଟା ସମସ୍ତଙ୍କର ଏକା ସମସ୍ତଙ୍କର ଏକା organs ଅଛି ତେଣୁ ସେ ଯୋଉ sense of equality ଟା ଆସିଛି ଯୋଉଟା ସାଇନ୍ସ ଦଉଛି ଯେ ତମେ ଗୋରା ହୁଅ କଳା ହୁଅ ବଡି ଟା ତ ଏକା ତମ ରକ୍ତ ଏକା ତମ ସବୁ କିଛି ଏକା ସାଇନ୍ସ ଏଇ ଜିନିଷଟା କହୁଛି ତେଣୁ ସେ ଯୋଉ ଗୋଟେ ଯୋଉ ମାନେ ଗୋଟେ racial superiority ଯୋଉଟା ଥିଲା जोटा कि गोटे ये रु आस्तिला कि जना ना हमें मे बी चर्च मते येटा देछि एज अ ह्यूमन बीइंग मु बधे सुपीरियर मु एटा ये करि परछि से जो जिंसटा को सेटा पूरा पूरा पूरी बॉम्बार्ड कर सकला एंड व्हेन आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट दीस आइडियाज ऑफ न्यूटन फॉर एग्जांपल न्यूटन जो आइडियाटा देथिले न्यूटन केबे भी हेले कहि नांती कि जे हां एप्पल टा मुंडरे पड़िला तापर से जानले ही हैज नेवर सेड एटा गोटे पॉपुलराइज करिया पे देयर वर दीस स्कॉलर्स लाइक वोल्टायर एंड रसल बर्टन रसल who popularized these ideas common man भितरे जो scientific temper टा को आनिया पे because गोटे scientific journal रे किए कोन लेखुची it's very difficult for a common man to understand एबे न्यूक्लियर साइंस रे कोन होउची कि एस्ट्रोफिजिक्स रे कोन होउची we will not understand unless गोटे पॉपुलर मैगजीन रे गोटे पॉपुलर वे रे लिखा हेची तेनो एप्पल टा जो मुंडरे पड़िला तापरे न्यूटन भाबिले जे काहे एप्पल टा तळे पड़िला ऊपर को गलानी that story was actually popularized by these social thinkers who they were trying to bring up this scientific temper which ultimately led to a secularistic atmosphere ମୁଁ ଯାଉଛି ଗୋଟେ ନୂଆ ଜାଗାକୁ because I started traveling ଏ ଯୋଉ scientific revolution ହେଇ ପାରିଲା ମୁଁ ଜାଣିଲି ଯେ ଗ୍ରାଭିଟି ଅଛି ତା ପୂର୍ବରୁ ମୁଁ ଭାବୁଥିଲି ଯେ ଆଚ୍ଛା ଆଚ୍ଛା ଲୋକ କାହିଁକି ଟ୍ରାଭେଲ କରୁନଥିଲେ ନା ମୁଁ କାହଳେ ଜାହାଜରେ ଯାଉ ଯାଉ ଯଦି I will reach at the end of the world ତାପରେ ମୁଁ ଗଳି ପଡିବି I just step over ନ୍ୟୁଟନ କହିଲେ କି ଯେ ନା ନା ତମେ ପଡିବନି there is a gravity force gravitational force that will pull you back ଆଉ ପୃଥିବୀଟା ଗୋଲ ତମେ ଯୋଉଠି ଯାଇଥିବ ବୁଲି ବୁଲି ସେଠି ପହଞ୍ଚିବ that gave immense confidence in human beings to travel they travel to these distant continents africa gale ye gale देखले लोक माने जो माने तांको भया दिसु नांती तांको भया कथा कहू नांती and science से जो बेस दोची but they are like you there is no difference between you से माने अलगा religion practice करि पार थांती they may not speak the language you speak may not believe in the faith that you have but they are like you age of secularization process it was triggered by this scientific revolution and you will see that, whenever we talk about the theory of evolution, we always tend to talk about Darwin. Darwin, he came up with this thesis that, we have evolved from animals. I mean, our forefathers were monkeys, and how with every species, change over a period of time and they evolve over time. I think he said कि jellyfish through first life आरंभ होएची and these were they concluded that that your appearance your traits they keep changing. And there was this, there was this kind of an idea of anti-evolutionary law during the 20th century as well. And they started banning the preachings of Charles Darwin, जोटा कि से biological evolution विषय कहते because it started challenging some of the basic tenets of Christianity. You know, এটা ଗୋଟେ long history ଦେଇକି ଆସିଛି ଯେକୌଣସି scientist କେବେ ହେଲେ ବି scientific facts କହୁଛନ୍ତି they have been banned by the church. It has always been there, and you will see that this process of secularization was not easy historically as well. There are so many literature which has talked about wars, persecutions, all kinds of violence against certain communities on the name in the name of religion. For example, you might have heard of, the Crusades. The crusade was nothing but certain kind of religious wars, and historically they were known. It was known that some 8 holy wars took place between 1095 to 1464, and it was between the uh, religious communities to have their claim over the holy lands of Palestine. Because whenever you talk about Bethlehem, whenever you talk about Jerusalem, they were considered to be the holy lands. It was a religious connotation सेठी अछि किए से land टाको acquire करि परिबो ताले सेटा तो religious ये the concept of suppose को कहबी कि jihad, it was like, it was like the a calling for them कि तमे जन्म होइछ एटा करके जाओ भगवान को पे तेनो जो holy war सबुरे लागि रहिछि on the basis of religion ए युद्धटा को हेइ चलिछि. And there is nothing new to it. In present century also you have such battles being fought on religious grounds. There is nothing new about it. Then you will see that uh, these religious conflict, it evolved as an independent political ethnic. Again when we talk about secularism, religious conflict ethnic group it will start having interferences, it will start violating things, and this kind of violence is everywhere. So whenever we talk about secularism basically it's an ideology, and it consists of 5 important postulates. Number one, it talks about the role of human autonomy. It says that as individuals you have the highest order of independent authority over yourself. A human mind अछि तमरो तमे भाबी पाउछ, तमे चिंता करि पाउछ कोटा ठीक कोटा भूल, तमे कोटे रिलीजियस टेक्स्ट कोन कहबा कि जेटा ठीक एटा भूल एटा करो सेटा करो, तमर निजर बुद्धि नाही जोटा कि एनलाइटमेंट तुमको एटा देथिला कि जे कम ऑन, यू आर फ्री थिंकिंग एडल्ट्स, you know what is best for you, what is best for the society. ଆଉ ଯଦି ମଣିଷର ତାର ନିଜ ଉପରେ କନଫିଡେନ୍ସ ନାହିଁ ତାହେଲେ ମଣିଷ ଆଉ ପଶୁ ଭିତରେ କିଛି ତଫାତ ରହିବନି. ତେଣୁ ସେକ୍ୟୁଲାରିଜମ ର ଗୋଟେ ଇମ୍ପୋର୍ଟାଣ୍ଟ ଆଇଡିଆ ଥିଲା ଯେ ହ୍ୟୁମାନ ଅଟୋନମି, ତମେ କଣ ଚାହୁଁଛ, ମତେ ଏଇଟା କୁହନି ଯେ ରିଲିଜିୟସ ଟେକ୍ସଟ କଣ ଚାହୁଁଛି, ପଲିଟିକାଲ ଅଥରିଟି କଣ ଚାହୁଁଛନ୍ତି, କି ମୋର ଫ୍ୟାମିଲିରେ ଅଥରିଟି କଣ ଚାହୁଁଛନ୍ତି, ମୋ କାଷ୍ଟ ଗ୍ରୁପ ର ଅଥରିଟି, ମୋ କାଷ୍ଟ କମ୍ୟୁନିଟି କଣ ଚାହୁଁଛନ୍ତି, ମୋ ଗାଁ ଲୋକ କଣ ଚାହୁଁଛନ୍ତି, ଯୋଉଟା ଠିକ ତମକୁ ଲାଗୁଛି ସେ ଯୋଉ ଠିକ ଭୁଲ ଜିନିଷଟା you have that power to decide because you know you have that knowledge in you, you have that freedom in you. So secular humanism, it places immense trust in human intelligence, human, it says that rather than a divine guidance you guide yourself. କାରଣ ଏଇ ଯୋଉ ପରିସ୍ଥିତିରେ ତମେ ପଡିଛ ଏଥିରେ ଆଉ କେହି ପଡିନାହାନ୍ତି. ତେଣୁ ଗୋଟେ ରିଲିଜିୟସ୍ ଟେକ୍ସଟ କୋଉ ପଏଣ୍ଟ ଅଫ ଭ୍ୟୁ ରୁ କୋଉ କଣ୍ଟେକ୍ସଟ ରେ ଲେଖା ହେଇଛି ସେଇଟା ତମକୁ ହୁଏତ ଗାଇଡ କରିପାରିବ, ବଟ୍ that will not be the sole factor in talking about a particular kind of a situation. ତମେ ଯୋଉ ପରିସ୍ଥିତିରେ ପଡିଛ ତମେ ସେଥିରୁ କେମିତି ବାହାରିବ, ତମେ ସେଟା ଫେସ୍ କରୁଛ, ତମଠୁ ଅଧିକ ସେଟା କେହି କହିପାରିବେନି. Secondly, it started saying that secularism, no, asserts that not only state and laws, but family relations, education, morality, knowledge, values, they are completely free from dominance of religion. Suppose mo value system କଥା କହିବି, not necessary कि मोर value system टा मोर religion ରୁ ଆସିବ, ମୋ value system ଟା ହଉଛି ଯୋଉଟା ମତେ ଠିକ ଲାଗୁଛି, ମୋ कि मते लागुची नाही एई परिस्थिति रे एटा ही ठीक, तेनु नॉट नेसेसरी एटा हां मोस्ट ऑफ द केसेस रे वैल्यू सिस्टम टा रिलीजन रू आसे जतले हमें धर्म कथा कहू ए पूर्व वी वर डिस्कसिंग अबाउट धर्म इन हिंदुइज्म, but the thing is that it's not necessary that you will relate it to religion every time. तमे ओटे परिस्थिति के देखो, तमे देखो कोन करि परछु, तमर की कैपेबिलिटी अछि करिया पे, तमे सेही अनुसार करिवो. तेणु somewhere whenever we talk about family relations, कोटा ठीक कोटा भूल मो फैमिली भितरे को जिनस मु पढिबा कथा, मु खाली रिलीजियस टेक्स्ट पढिले हबो सेया नै, मो आइडिया ऑफ मोरालिटी टा नॉट नेसेसरीली रिलीजन रू ड्रॉ करा हबो, मो नॉलेज माने खाली रिलीजियस नॉलेज नै. सो यू हैव टू कीप, तमे पढो मे बी तमे तने रिलीजियस टेक्स्ट पढिबो, मे बी इट विल guide your morality, it will fine tune your values, it will sharpen your knowledge, but it doesn't mean कि मुझे जदि पढुनी मोर एई सब जिंस रहिबनी, with अन्य जिंस मो निज एक्सपीरियंस, मोर एम्पैथी फॉर अदर्स, मोर कमिटमेंट टुवर्ड्स द सोसाइटी मते एडा का सब गाइड करिवो. So that is how Mark Calendar says that it's not to is it's according to Calendar he says that it's not to keep religion out of politics, but to keep it out of social relations. Politics खाली बाहर परिवाटा important है, हम social relationships सेटा बाहर जिवा दरकार. Thirdly, secularism again जो कथा हम कहली, it seeks the autonomy of individual but also the autonomy of reason. हाँ तमरा गोटे choice रही, but that choice से जो तमे जोटा choose कल सेटा तमे गोटे भाबी चिंती कि हम गोटे rational choice नउची, तमे गोटे माने इमोशनल है कि एटा ठीक एटा भूल गोटे rationally तमे बिहेव करि पारुछो. So you have to give complete autonomy to reason, because reason रो गोटे क्राइटेरिया था, it is in pursuit of truth. से सबले truth खोजे, से faith देखेनी, से कहनी कि जे अच्छा मो टेक्स्ट रे कोन कहिची कि एटा केमति प्रेस्क्राइब करथनता, नो इट्स truth, जोटा सत्य से it will stand out, and reason has to be based on that. Then secularism gives immense space to values of pluralism and religious tolerance, because you will see that it doesn't make any religion final, key, infallible, and it's beyond rational scrutiny. So plurality of values with a बहुत प्रकार values maintain करि परिबे, କିନ୍ତୁ secularism मते से scope टा दो, जो scope टा के religion दे परिबने, religion गोटे बहुत न्यारो करदबो ओ value system को. मु से जो plurality मते suppose Christianity रो से जो confession concept टा गोटे भूल करिछि, से मते जेतरा जाय कि ठाकुर को आगे confess करूछंती, वो तो ठाकुर को आगे confess न कर पारे, but when I am speaking it out to myself, that itself is a great healer. मते मोर गोटे गिल्ट टू फ्री करोछि, मोर मते रियलाइज करि दोछि जे वेयर आई वेंट रॉन्ग, गोटे सेल्फ इंट्रोस्पेक्शन आउछि. Secularism actually talks about taking about values of pluralism, and most important, secularism is not anti-religion. हमते भूल धारणा रही जाए जे secularism माने तमे religion को respect करो, that is not the thing. You will see that whenever we talk about secular life and knowledge, secular or autonomy, uh, of individual autonomy, it's about how you conduct your life. It has nothing to do with religion. Jodi religion तुमको guide करूछि, that's a personal choice. But for example, you will see People's Republic of China. tomorrow text example ta dechi, it has a policy that is opposed to religion, but strictly it's not a secular state. They are very conservative, both non secular practices tankar achi, but tankar samti gote they are quite opposed to religion. We shouldn't have this impression that secularism is the opposite of religiosity. That's not true. Then as I told you that let's go back to history and take a look at the European experience. Secularism concept ଆସିଲା କୋଉଠୁ କେମିତି ମାନେ it started affirming its goals ଯେମିତି କହିଲି କି ଯେ it was during the reformation and NASA period, that it was the phase of 16th century. uh, there are so many movies on it also. You will see how it was that during the time of King Henry VIII or the King of England, Queen Elizabeth I, father thile. It was during his time, when these structural reformations in religion started, because it was during his time when he decided that the queen was not able to give him a male child to be the next successor. So he wanted to marry a another another woman. But the thing is that in those days, Catholic religion never permitted divorce. Divorce concept nothing. And this lady Anne, she said that I'm not going to be a mistress to the king. I'll be a queen. I'll have the legitimate right of being a queen. So, it was on those grounds, these ideas of reformation started. In the church to divided, कि गोटे politics, गोटे monarch ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ church ଭିତରେ ଗୋଟେ division ହେଇଗଲା, and both have their own followers, and that is how these ideas started. And you might have heard of Martin Luther. He was the one who initiated this Protestant Reformation, and he started, talking about the individual's right to understand God. अरे ମୋ ଭଗବାନଙ୍କୁ ମୁଁ ଯେମିତି ବୁଝିବି, I don't need an interpreter କି ଭଗବାନ ଏଇଆ କହିଛନ୍ତି। ତେଣୁ ଏଇ ଯୋଉ interpretation of religion ସେଇ ଜିନିଷଟା permitted ହଉନଥିଲା କି ନା ଏଇଟା ମାନେ ଏଇଟା ତମେ କଣ ବୁଝିବ। ତେଣୁ religion ମାନେ ଏଇଟା। ତେଣୁ ଏଇ ଯୋଉ ଜିନିଷଟା this is my relationship with my God. So let me, I should have the independence of interpreting the words of God, which has to be independent from the church. मते church कहवा दरकार नाही जे भगवान एया कहउछंती। मु मोर जहा माने बाहर करिवि with my own social standing, I will have to do it. So here you will see that basically this reformation was a religious movement, and after some time it became quite reactionary, and you will see that it did not produce more toleration or religious liberty among the masses, because it was mostly the popular masses of the illiterates who were influenced by the controversies of reformation, and popular religion, it continued to be, like the folk religion. But the biggest influence of reformation was on Christianity itself. After reformation, there were several streams of Christianity, several churches, national churches coming up, and each of them had their own several religious perspective, each opposing the other. ଯେମିତି କି we just know about Protestantism, and sorry ଯୋଉଟା ତମେ ପଢିଥିଲ Weberଙ୍କ context ରେ, he is talking about Calvinism. He is saying that how Calvinism as a separate sect, different from Catholicism, which was, again a sect within Protestantism, was responsible in giving birth to the spirit of capitalism. Because, Protestant सबबड़े भावंती जे नहीं कामटा गोटे burden, because our Bible रे अछि ना Adam Eve गोटे original sin करथिले, एटा काली हम Christianity रे पढले, that is, you know, Eve prompted Adam to eat the forbidden fruit, the apple, and it was because of that original sin we were punished here on earth. ଆଉ earth ରେ ଆମକୁ କାମ କରିବାକୁ ପଡୁଛି, ଯଦି heaven ରେ ଥାନ୍ତେ ଆମକୁ କାମ କରିବାକୁ ପଡିନଥାନ୍ତା। But Protestants would say कि ना work is God, duty is God, जो slogans था, এটা Protestantism ରୁ ହିଁ ଆସିଛି। तो ये जो येटा, the way you look at work, कैथोलिसिज्म कहबो कि अच्छा जदि ताकू तमे धार देछ, यदि ऋण देछ ता ऊपर यदि मो इंटरेस्ट चार्ज करछि दैट इज सेम। प्रोटेस्टेंटिज्म कहबो कि जे जणको यदि मो असुविधा टाइम रे हेल्प करि पारली आ ताकू ता पर किछि से मते अधिक पैसा देला, व्हाट इज रॉन्ग इन तेनो गोटे कैपिटलिस्टिक डेवलपमेंट हैला बिकॉज़ ऑफ प्रोटेस्टेंटिज्म। प्रोटेस्टेंटिज्म रे लग्जरी, अल्कोहलिज्म, एनी काइंड ऑफ गोटे ଭଲ ଯୋଉଟା କି ଆମେ କହୁଛେ consumption based lifestyle ଟା ସେମାନେ ପାପ ବୋଲି କହିବେ because କିଏ କେତେ earn କରିପାରିଲା so you had this dictums coming up ଯୋଉଟା କି ଯେମିତି କି ଆମର ଅଛି କଣ early to bed early to rise makes a person healthy wealthy and wise ମାନେ ଜଲ୍ଦି ଶୋଇବ ଜଲ୍ଦି ଉଠିବ ଗୋଟେ ଡିସିପ୍ଲିନ ଆଣିବ ଲାଇଫ ରେ it will give you more profit it will give you more result କି a stitch in time saves nine ଆଜି ଗୋଟେ ଛିଣ୍ଡି ଯାଇଛି ଗୋଟେ stitch ପକେଇ ଦଉଛି କାଲି ପର୍ଯ୍ୟନ୍ତ ଯଦି ୱେଟ୍ କରି ମତେ 9ଟା stitch ପକେଇବାକୁ ପଡିବ ତେଣୁ 9ଟା stitch ପକେଇବି ମାନେ ମୋ ରିସୋର୍ସ ବି ସରିଲା ମୋ ଟାଇମ ବି ସରିଲା ମୋର ଏନର୍ଜି ବି ସରିଲା that is not capitalistic ସେଟା profit oriented ହେଲା ତେଣୁ ଏଇ ଯୋଉ different perspective in religion ଯୋଉଟାକୁ ଆସିଲା it was a post reformation phase and every religious perspective was completely opposing each other ତାଙ୍କ ଭିତରେ ପୁରା ମାନେ almost ବାଡିଆ ପିଟା ହେଇ ଯାଉଥିଲେ they had all what you say all kinds of oppositional views and you will see that this secularization process it could not be initiated only after uh, this rational scientific explanation satisfactorily. There were these NASA thinkers and astronomers who who challenged the theological visions of the cosmos. ଯେମିତି ନାଇଁ ସେମାନେ challenge କଲେ ଯୋଉମାନେ astronomy ଜାଣିଥିଲେ they started challenging this religious theological visions. Then as I told you earlier, Darwin's theory of evolution. Please mute your microphones. That was also, responsible in creating, in, in combating the dogma. So, it was the mixed effort of science, of what you say, of whatever we discussed, certain popular revolutions that was responsible in bringing up this process of secularization. And secularization as a process secularism that concept came after reformation but as a process it has a lot to do through publicity through education through media through movements कि हाँ it take up करो because ଗୋଟେ popular belief ନ ଆସିଲେ ଏଟା ହେଇ ପାର ନଥାନ୍ତା ଆମେ ଯଦି କହିବା କି ଯେ ନା we tend to believe or we tend to accept whatever we see in the mass media ଏବେ ସପୋଜ କୋଭିଡ କୁ ନେଇକି ବହୁତ ଗୁଡେ ର୍ୟୁମର୍ସ ହବ ଆମେ ମିଡିଆରେ ଯାହା ଦେଖିବା ଆମେ ସେଟା ବିଲିଭ କରିବା so similarly when we have a very narrow centric life and we don't have any way of guidance apart from religion we will only look into those religious texts kintu with popularization of this mass media and education where they started bringing up this gap between religion and politics and education and these are all separate institutions don't confuse these with each other they are completely different from one another that feeling came during the 19th century and you had these secularist campaigners like Bradlaugh and he had an extensive propaganda to bring up this secularization these secular ideas ମୁଁ କହିଲି ନା it's ଗୋଟେ single process ନୁହେଁ ମାନେ it's a combined effort କି କେମିତି ମାନେ ଗୋଟେ scientific revolution ହଉଛି you start sharing these scientific ideas are popularized ଯେମିତି କି ମୁଁ କହିଲି ନ୍ୟୁଟନଙ୍କର ଆପଲ ଥିଓରି କଥା ଆପଲ ଟା ମୁଣ୍ଡରେ ପଡିଲା ନ୍ୟୁଟନ ନେଭର ଟୋଲ୍ଡ କି ଆପଲ ଟା ତାଙ୍କ ମୁଣ୍ଡରେ ପଡିଲା କି ସେ ତାପରେ ଗ୍ରାଭିଟେସନ ବିଷୟରେ ସେ ଜାଣିଲେ he never claimed those ideas it was popularized by Voltaire it was popularized by Bertrand Russell ତେଣୁ ଏଇ ଯୋଉ ଜିନିଷ ଏଗୁଡାକ ଗୋଟେ ଗୋଟେ ପପୁଲାର ଫୋରମ ରେ କ୍ରିଏଟ କରାଗଲା कि this is the thing there is a long path ahead ଏଠି ଦେଖ ଏଠି କଣ ଏମିତି ଗୋଟେ ସାଇଣ୍ଟିଫିକ ଇଏ ଅଛି ହ୍ୟୁମାନ ବିଂ ସମସ୍ତେ ଏକା ରିଲିଜିଅନ ଟା ଗୋଟେ ଭିତରର କଥା ତାକୁ ବାହାରେ ଇଏ କରିବାର କଥା ଇଏ ନାହିଁ କିଛି ତେଣୁ ଲେଟ୍ସ ନଟ୍ ହ୍ୟାଭ୍ ଦିସ୍ ଆମେ ପ୍ରୋଗ୍ରେସ କରିବାକୁ ହେଲେ ଆମକୁ ଏୟା କରିବାକୁ ହବ ଆମ ଗୋଟେ ବିଜନେସ ରେ ମେ ବି ଭଲ କରିବାକୁ ହେଲେ ଆମକୁ ଏଇଟା କରିବାକୁ ହବ କ୍ୟାଥୋଲିସିଜମ କହୁଛି ଋଣ ନବନି କିନ୍ତୁ ମୁଁ ଯଦି ଋଣ ନେଇକି ବେଟର କରିପାରୁଛି ଆଉ ସେଇ ପଇସାରୁ ମୁଁ ଆଉ କାହାକୁ ହେଲ୍ପ କରିପାରୁଛି ନଥିଙ୍ଗ ରଙ୍ଗ ଇନ୍ ଇଟ୍ ତେଣୁ ଏଇ ଯୋଉ ପପୁଲାରାଇଜଡ ହେଲା କି ତା ପୂର୍ବରୁ ହୁଏତ ମୁଁ ଋଣ ଉପରେ କାହାଠୁ ଇଣ୍ଟରେଷ୍ଟ ନେଇଥିଲେ ମତେ ଲାଗିଥାନ୍ତା ଯେ ଆଚ୍ଛା ଆଚ୍ଛା ମୁଁ ଗୋଟେ ପାପ କରିଦେଲି କି ଆମର ଆମର ଧର୍ମରେ ଏଇଟା ନାହିଁ ମୁଁ ଏଇଟା କରିଦେଲି କିନ୍ତୁ ଗୋଟେ ମାସ ମିଡିଆ ଦ୍ୱାରା ଏଇଟା ପ୍ରୋପାଗେଟ ହବ ଯେ କିଛି ଅସୁବିଧା ନାହିଁ ତମେ ଅଧିକା ପଇସା ରୋଜଗାର କଲ ତା ଅସୁବିଧାରେ ଟାଇମରେ ତମେ ତାକୁ ହେଲ୍ପ କଲ, ତମର ଯେତିକି ଅଧିକା ପଇସା ହଉଛି ତମେ ଆଉ ଜଣଙ୍କୁ ଦେଇକି ପୁଣି ହେଲ୍ପ କର, you know, it's a noble cause, ଯେ ତମ ଭିତରେ ସେ କନଫିଡେନ୍ସ ଟା ଆଣୁଛି, and that was the process of secularization. So whenever we talk about this process of secularization in India, again it's separate from the Western value, and I told you, you know, these these stages have gone through various stages, various capitalist institutions, various theories. They have all gone into in bringing this process. And as I told you, you will see that, for example, secularization, it actually gave birth to this relationship between certain socio-political institution and religion in Western Europe. For example, Lutheranism. It's a faith that you will see in Denmark, Iceland, Finland, is of this area. And you will see Catholicism enjoys a privileged position in Italy, Spain, Portugal. Church of England, जोटा कि सबुठु गोटे माने गोटे बहुत prestigious ये बोली धरा जाए. Church of England is subordinate to the British sovereign because the supreme, he or she is also the supreme governor of the Church of England. Again, France, Catholics, they have become completely secular. So you have, these changes coming up, and French society, they prohibit clerics from teaching, in public schools. कि clerics माने जो माने religious prescriptions दियंती से माने they have this anti clerical registration कि काले से माने स्कूल रे पाठ पढ़ाइले से माने गोटे religious tilt आनिबे education system रे, so they are prohibited. So here you have these ideas like the church property belongs to the state, uh, worship services outside the church was forbidden. Then government can open any place of worship and determine that which clerics will be permitted. Clergy, you know, they cannot participate in politics or wear their, traditional costumes and criticize public officials. They cannot vote. ଏମିତି କିଛିଟା ନିୟମ ଅଛି. Church cannot have their own radio and television stations because ଯଦି church ଆରମ୍ଭ କରିବ ନିଜର radio television station ଥାଇବ, they will propagate a different kind of a idea. Suppose I would say that jihad, ଯଦି ଗୋଟେ Islamic terrorist group ଗୋଟେ ତାର ଗୋଟେ radio station ଆରମ୍ଭ କରିବ and it is permitted by the government, ସେ ଗୋଟେ ତାର jihadist propaganda ଚଲେଇବ. Religion ଯେତିକି guide କରିବ, it also has the power to destroy societies, destroy minds. ଏଇ ସବୁ ଜିନିଷକୁ ନେଇକି ଏଇ ଯୋଉ religious institution ଆଉ other social institutions ର relationship ଟା ବହୁତ ଭଲ ଭାବରେ it has been guided and it has been what you say closed by the state. Now, talking about the Indian experience, you will see that the Indian experience was quite different from the European experience. You will see that secularism, it's not an optional thing as far as democracy was concerned, but it was a necessity. जोठी हमें democracy कहूचे, without secularism केवल democracy आसी परिबो? Do you think केबे हेले आसी परिबो? तेणु जोठी आमे modernity कथा कहबा सेठी निश्चय democracy आसीबो, सेठी निश्चय industrialization आसीबो, सेठी निश्चय secularism आसीबो. These are some, सेठी freedom आसीबो, सेठी individual autonomy आसीबो, सेठी इक्वालिटी आसीबो. ए सब जिंस दे गो हैंड इन हैंड. मु कहबी मु एटा बाछि कि रखिबी सेटा नेबिनी, सेटा हेई परिबनी. They are like, they are, they go hand in glove with each other. So you will find that there are several religious groups and caste groups whose members wish to relate with each other on a pluralistic ground. And pluralism is not a recent thing. ଆମେ ଯେମିତି କହୁଛେ କି ଯେ pluralism ଟା ଗୋଟେ modernity ର କଥା, ଗୋଟେ modern context ରେ emerge କରିଛି. इंडियन केस रे सेया हे नथला मिडिएवल टाइम्स रो हमरो केबेठु इस्लामिक इन्वेडर्स आसीचंती से माने सेटल कर जाय छंती यू हैव बुद्धिस्ट यू हैव जैन्स जति की भी हम रिलीजियस क्रिश्चियनिटी माने इवन जेटा जवाहरलाल नेहरू कर काली हमें गोटे कोटेशन पढी थिले काली गत क्लास रे when discussing Christianity नेहरू क्लियरली सेड कि colonialism ब्रिटिशर्स कठु आसीने क्रिश्चियनिटी जो एंशिएंट टाइम्स नु से जो apostles का कथा जीसस कर कुहा जाउता तांको भितर जणे थॉमस बोली थिले सी आसी कि इंडिया रे प्रोपागेट करथिले सो इट्स एन एंशिएंट रिलीजन इन इंडिया आल्सो तेनो गोटे प्लूरलिस्टिक कल्चर हमर केबेट रही आसी छी फ्रॉम द मिडिएवल एंशिएंट टाइम्स and even you have non-Hindu religious groups like Syrian Christians who had fitted into this caste system se mane caste system ta ko ତାଙ୍କ ନିଜ structure ଭିତରେ ନେଇ ସାରିଛନ୍ତି and then on the other hand you have the prime source of legitimacy of the armed groups that is the Sikhs the Marathas जो ମାନଙ୍କର ଗୋଟେ cultural hegemony ରହିଛି so there has always been these dominant groups and it's always seen that the ruling dominant groups would tolerate even subsidize different faiths provided others publicly accept their power and it was found in 18th and 19th century that these dominant cultural groups जो माने कि यूपी रो they started setting the limits within other cultural groups they said कि हाँ you'll have to practice this you have to they started dictating this in modern times we all need equal rights and we talk about the we point out whenever we believe that a particular cultural group or a dominant group is trying to impose itself so today secularism has a broader base and if you talk about the colonial context in India, you will see that we तो हमारा renaissance है नहीं, reformation है नहीं, industrial revolution है नहीं, but Indian experience of colonialism, sorry, of secularism was, you know, it was more or less related to colonialism. Firstly, you will see that for example, in the context of Bengal, you will see that there is a difference between the European Renaissance and ଯେମିତି ଯୋଉଠି cultural Renaissance ଆମେ କହୁ Indian cultural Renaissance କୋଉ time ଟା କହୁ normally ଯୋଉ time ଟାରେ we talk about Ram Mohan Roy we talk about Dayanand Saraswati when the reform started so basically ଆମେ ତାକୁ cultural Renaissance କହୁ Indian context ରେ and Bengal took a dominating role during that period of time. You will see that when you have this European Renaissance actually it could establish itself and flourish in free and independent states. But in case of India, it actually was an outcome of this colonial resistance, the foreign conquest, foreign domination, as a outcome, as a form of resistance to that. We started having this kind of a Renaissance. Secondly, European Renaissance liberated the mind, and it helped them to discover the world, to move away from their own nation states. ତମେ ମାନେ ଦେଖ ଯଦି ସେ ଯୋଉ ରିନାସା ଫେଜ୍ ଟା ପରେ ହିଁ they started traveling because ସେଇ ଟାଇମ୍ ରେ scientific revolution ହେଲା ରିନାସା ଆସିଲା ଏ ସବୁ ହେଲା ପରେ they started going out on these sea voyages जो mercantile capitalism ସେଠି emerge କଲା and they discovered the world because ସେଟା ଗୋଟେ help କଲା ତାକୁ ଗୋଟେ broader outlook ଆଣିବା ପାଇଁ and ଗୋଟେ ଇଂଲଣ୍ଡ ଛୋଟ ଓଡିଶା ଭଳିଆ ରାଜ୍ୟ ତାର ଏଣ୍ଟାର ତାର area haba and it could actually bring 90% of the world under its domain. So that is how it discovered the world. And the world witnessed a revolution in religion, in foundation of modern science. Today, dhire dhire we started accepting, trying to break, bringing a break from it. Indian Renaissance, it was not that far-reaching. Our Renaissance was, just what do you say? It was just restricted to certain aspects of life. हमें बेसी ये कुछ जाई पारे So there you will find the difference. And whenever you talk about Indian culture, I mean, it is normally कहूँ it's a salad bowl culture because you have this multilingual, multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multi-caste, multi, everything is multiple there. So it's a salad bowl. ଯେମିତି କି suppose ମୁଁ କହିବି କି ଯେ ଘାଣ୍ଟରେ ସବୁ ପରିବା ପଡୁଛି କିନ୍ତୁ ସେଟା ମିଶି ଯାଉଛି ମିଶିକି ଗୋଟେ separate entity ହଉଛି all these separate vegetables they mingle their identity ତାଙ୍କର identity କୁ ସେମାନେ ସମସ୍ତେ ହରେଇ ଦଉଛନ୍ତି କାରଣ କୋଉଟା ମିଶିକି କଣ ହଉଛି ଗୋଟେ separate taste କିନ୍ତୁ create ହଉଛି ଯୋଉଟା କି ଆମେ melting pot model କହୁ normally you will see it in America and others. So कि American civilization यदि आपण देखिबे, mostly people from Europe, from different parts of the world, सेठी Spanish जाइकी settle कले, Italian कले, Portuguese कले, English कले, and they all mingled their identity become Americans. So not American English कहवा आरंभ कले, which was different from the British English. But in India, we all have, maintained that ethnic uniqueness. Say salad bowl रे जेमती bowl रे भी salad अच्छी आपण जानी पाउछन this is a tomato, this is a carrot, this is a radish, this is an onion, this is a cucumber. You are able to identify it separately. That's the case of India. So our case of secularism is, it is based on this concept of unity or diversity. Mostly secularism ta basis thai, but ours is, it's a unique case of secularism and it's a very difficult case of secularism. And whenever we started having debates on the practice of secularism in India, there has been always certain differences even between leaders like Gandhi and Nehru as well. Scholars like Madani has pointed out that secularism in its place it makes a guarded attack on modernization because secularism and Indian culture they are mismatched because of two reasons. First, mainstream enlightenment view that religion is irrational, and if secularism wants to remove religion from public life, it will not happen. Because ଆମ ମୁଣ୍ଡରେ ଗୋଟେ ରହିଯାଇଛି ଯେ any religion is irrational. But ଆମ Indian public life ରୁ religion ଟାକୁ କେବେ ଆମେ ବାହାର କରିଦେଇ ପାରିବା କି? It was impossible to many. Many felt that it's impossible. Madan says that no religion could be completely evicted. कि एटा काढ़ी की पूरा फोपाड़ी दबा religion टा ठीक नहीं. सेमती केबे हेई परिबोनी. And that's the reason we never had these kind of models where we started throwing away religion because we knew that for religion it's a way of life for people. Say rational ho ki irrational ho, we don't have any right to comment on that. But at the same time, you will see that. Nehru, for instance, he started having certain secular objectives whenever he was talking about state institutions. He, ଯେମିତି କି ମୁଁ କହିଲି ଗୋଟେ ଗଭର୍ଣ୍ଣମେଣ୍ଟ ଅଫିସରେ ଆମେ ଗୋଟେ କୋଉ ଠାକୁର ଠାକୁରାଣୀଙ୍କର କି କାହାର ଗୋଟେ ସିମ୍ବଲ ଆମେ we don't display that. We display the national flag, which is a symbol of secularism. It's the symbol of the nation state, but a secular identity. And he actually made it. He believed that it's very difficult that ଗୋଟେ country ଯେମିତି କହିବା କି ନା ନା କିଛି religion ରହିବନି ସେମିତି ହେଇପାରିବନି. It's a part because the Indian way of life. ଯେତେବେଳେ ଆମେ Hinduism ପଢିଲେ କି ଯାହା ବି ପଢିଲେ ଆମେ ଦେଖିଲେ ଯେ it's a way of life. You cannot completely throw away religion from one's life. It is going to be unsuccessful. And that's the reason he started saying कि state रे कौनसी institution रे we will not have the influence of religion. तेणु कोउ प्रकार text तमर education system रे रहिबो. You will not have education, religious text in your education system. तम education system रे we are not taught कि वेद उपनिषद रे कोन होइछि कि कुरान रे कोन अछि कि बाइबल रे कोन लिखा अछि. No religious institute, no education institution will propagate those ideas. कि politics रे गोटे religion को नै कि तम policies formulation होबनी. The government cannot do that. Our constitution completely abstains you from doing that. कि take for example marriage. हो कि no हो, nobody can say that a Hindu cannot marry a Muslim. Your constitution allows you. Practice केते दूर लोग को that's a different thing. The government actually made it very clear that state institutions, right, there will be secular institutions, there will be no place for religion. And at the same time, you will see that since you know nobody should demand for the removal of religion from public life. He said that you he actually wanted certain resource of every religion so that they can spread tolerance, they can coexist, because we knew that this the uniqueness of India lies in its salad bowl model. ଏଥିରେ ବିଭିନ୍ନ ଲାଙ୍ଗୁଏଜ ରହିବ, ବିଭିନ୍ନ ରିଲିଜିୟସ୍ ଗ୍ରୁପ ରହିବ, ଏତେ ମଲ୍ଟି ଏଥନିକ୍ ଗ୍ରୁପ ତ ଆପଣ ମାନେ ଦୁନିଆରେ ଆଉ କୋଉଠି ପାଇବେନି ଯୋଉଟା ଇଣ୍ଡିଆରେ ପାଇବେ। and none of them have mingled their identities। କେହି ଆମେରିକାନ୍ସ ହେଇ ଯାଇନାହାନ୍ତି କି ଗୋଟେ ରିଲିଜିୟନ ଗୋଟେ ଲାଙ୍ଗୁଏଜ ଇଏ କରୁଛନ୍ତି। they all came from different parts of the world। ୟୁରୋପିଆନ୍ସ ଥିଲେ, ସେଥିରେ ଆଫ୍ରିକାନ୍ସ ଥିଲେ, ସେଥିରେ ଏସିଆନ୍ସ ଥିଲେ, but they all have become Americans today। କିନ୍ତୁ India is such a uniqueness, they are Indians but at the same time say ethnicity has been maintained। so that itself it's a form of a modern it's the best place for evolving of modern secularism। how ଏଠି କୌଣସି ପ୍ରକାର ଗୋଟେ ପ୍ରକାର religion କୁ you cannot give primacy। then you have scholars like Ashish Nandi। Ashish Nandi is a psychologist, and he actually, he started attacking modernization। He said that, he started distinguishing religion as a faith from religion as an ideology। He says that when you talk about faith, faith is more or less a way of life. And when you talk about ideology, it's like, the national, the subnational, the cross-national identifier, where, they all have their own socio-economic interest groups. And modernization produces religion as an ideology rather than a way of life, rather than a faith। And he says that, this modern scientific nationalist secularism that we talk about is actually in crisis, because in places where religion has importance, it is not possible to make religion a private preference। I will say, when today we try to keep politics away from religion, we try to say that no, it's a secular thing. Religion is something which has to be placed in your private, in your homes। ଘର ବାହାରକୁ religion ଟାଣନ୍ତୁନି। But could we stop communalization of politics? Communalization of politics was right there before independence। So that's what he says, that the secularism that we talk about today, it has become an intolerant ideology with modernization, with development and scientific growth। So this is where we are actually going astray from the European experience। In the European experience, they had scientific growth, development, modernization, nation building along with secularism। But here, these things are actually bringing a different intolerant kind of a secularism। And this secularism alienates believers and grow, it's trying to create both kind of new and old kinds of violence। Old kind of violence, it's in the form of backlash of these marginalized believers who believe that they have been a vulnerable group, or they have been neglected over the years। And the new violence is between nation state and religious community, that is the communal violence that we see। So whenever we talk about secularism, you will see that the Western idea that kept religion out of politics. And here we have the non-Western secularism, which has a continuous dialogue, among the religious traditions and among the secular। Because, for example, ଆମେ ଏତେ କହୁଛେ कि ନାଇଁ ନାଇଁ religion ଟା ମାନେ ହଉଛି, it has to, secularism ମାନେ ହଉଛି religion has to take a back seat, ସେଟା public life ରେ ସେଟା ରହିବନି, ସେଟା state ରେ interfere କରିବନି। But do you see, can you look at this idea of politics without religion? There is a continuous interaction between the secular and the religious too। Government ର ଗୋଟେ ଏବେ triple talaq case ହେଲା, ତା ପୂର୍ବରୁ ଶାହାବାନୁ case ହେଇଥିଲା। The state every time it has to draw in the Maulvis ki acha acha eta hochi jinsa, eta hochi ye, they enter a dialogue। ये कौन कहूची से कौन कहूची you know the notion of secularism in India is completely not antithetical, to the idea of communalism. To take best strategy, it goes, hand in hand with the religious practitioners. So that is how these modern day social scientists, they believe that this is the new phase of secularism that India is witnessing, and they would not like to privatize religion or rationalize politics, because that's the truth that we have to accept it. And today, when you talk about this modern culture, it's it's completely, there are so many nuances to it. We cannot simply talk about, that secularism is antithetical to communalism or nationalism. We have to take all these things in a ballad, and we have to, take up a middle path. So there has to be an interaction between the secular and the religious practices. That's what. So this is how the idea of secularism and the experience of secularism was different in the Indian context. Now I will move on to the next segment, that is communalism and fundamentalism. Mm. You see, we'll just take up a simple question as to first of all, what is fundamentalism? Uh, Fundamentalism, you will see, it is like returning to the fundamentals. When I say that you tend to return to the fundamentals, it is like, you are returning to the basic tenets of your religion. You are returning to the original meanings that is given in a religion when the text was founded for the first time. And what does a fundamentalist do? A fundamentalist is basically the one who says that there is there can be no interpretation, because whatever is there in the text, it's God's own words. ଆମେ interpret କରୁଛେ कि ना ଗୀତାର ମାନେ ଏୟା ନୁହେଁ ସେଇଆ. You cannot come up with multiple meanings. ସେ କହୁଛନ୍ତି ଭଗବାନ ଯାହା କହୁଛନ୍ତି ଗୋଟେ କଥା କହିକି ଯାଇଛନ୍ତି. ତେଣୁ whenever you are talking about Gita or the Quran or the Bible or the Gurbani that belongs to the Sikh, you will see that these fundamentalists would believe that there is only one word that God has given, and there is one way of looking at things. So basically, fundamentalist mane, I mean, we actually define the ones who go to the basic tenets and accept the text in its first original version without allowing any kind of interpretation. Because whenever you talk about any religious text or any text, every text is subject to interpretation uh, within a context. आजिका context रे यदि मु रामायण को interpret करिवि कि गीता को interpret करिवि, I will have a particular sense of the present day crisis and try to reread the thing. A fundamentalist would not allow that. See, कहबे कि जे interpretation is your interpreting means you are violating. You are actually creating certain kind of mischief with the originality of the texts. Uh, to come up with some examples, there was this extra. There was this American fundamentalist Gary North. He said that the Bible contains answers to all problems a person faces, including day-to-day problem, economic life, the family relationship, केमती हबो, politics, law, medicine, सब कुछ इनसे Bible अछि. कौन औषध खाइबो भी जदि if you read the Bible properly, you will get the answer. So how is it possible that when you say that you are going for a secular notion of life, and religion doesn't have a space apart from your personal spiritual life, it's wrong. Because he would say that he's a fundamentalist. A fundamentalist would argue in this way कि କେମିତି ହେବନି ଏଥିରେ ଆନ୍ସର ଗୁଡାକ ସବୁ ଯାକ ସେଇଥିରେ ଅଛି. How can I keep political, foreign, family ki legal affairs away from religion? This is not possible. It is not one aspect of life. Religion is your entire life. That's what a fundamentalist would say. So whenever we talk about fundamentalism, you will see that fundamentalists, they insist on religious control over politics, over education. And you know, for example, Pope Pius IX, uh, he, uh, he was there in around 1864, and he was the one who actually, came up with this views that when you are trying to keep the religious text away from the school syllabus or college syllabus, you are doing a great wrong. It's the right of the parents that they have to instruct and the guide the students in a particular way, and if you're doing it in a non-religious way, that's a sin in itself. And the teachers who talk about secularism, they are false teachers, because they are trying to take away the important components and the influence of God's teaching and the Catholic Church instruction from the youth, and which will mean that at some point of time the youth will be struck with all kinds of vices, their minds will be polluted, and they all will take up a wrong road in life. So that's the greatest sin. So today the greatest sinners are the teachers, are the framers who believe that religious contents of education is should not be there. And then, you can have fundamentalists in all religion. There can be Muslim fundamentalists, there can be, Christian fundamentalists. In Muslim fundamentalism, they believe that, we have to have the ancient penal codes, like, if you did anything wrong, then your hands or your feet must be cut off, or you should be stoned to death, or, taking up all these what is cruel penalties for punishment. And even you can have a Christian fundamentalist who sticks to the Old Testament, and they believe that murder, adultery, homosexuality, or all these practices, death should be advocated, and they believe that they believe in those torturous kind of punishments. So if you talk about fundamentalism, they really do not believe that there is a kind of equality among all religions. They will not believe that there is one God, or they will not say that Hinduism is equal to Islamic religion, or if you look into the contents of all religious texts, they have the same thing. They will not believe in it. They believe in a kind of a hierarchy. Suppose I'm a Hindu fundamentalist, and I believe that my religion is the most superior one, and other religions are false religions, and if somebody is preaching or practicing a kind of a false religion, that person must be stopped. So that's the way fundamentalists they act. And as I told you, you will find them everywhere. And basically, fundamentalists, you will find a lot of similarity between the communalists and the fundamentalists. Suppose I will say that what is then communalism? Communalism, it's if you look at the context of India, it historically developed in three phases. The first stage came in the last part of 19th century, when they were followers of a religion, particular religion in the whole of India, and they started believing that there is not a commonality of interest among them, and this led to the notion that Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Christians, they are all different. They will form different communities. They have different self-interest. They have different socio-cultural, economic interests. Let's not mingle each other. They have to be, accepted as isolated communities. Unfortunately, many nationalists also accepted that kind of a mosaic culture. Um, then communalism again re-entered, because on the basis of nationalism in the 19th century was based on these communalistic communities, because you will have Hindu nationalist leaders, you had Muslim nationalist leaders who would be taking the leadership for their own community, And the second phase came with the 20th century. That is when it was more prominent. We started talking about the Hindu Muslim thing, and we started talking about how there was a class of interest, and then the third ultimate phase came with the partition when Jinnah proposed the two-nation theory. Okay, so whenever we talk about fundamentalism and communalism, you will see that they have certain ideological elements which is completely common, and but at the same time they differ from each other. You will see that they both attack the concept of separation of religion from politics. They don't like this idea of secularism. They oppose the concept of equal truth in all religion. They try to advocate control of education by religious institutions. They believe that if we return to the if you have to return to the past glory, the greatness. Suppose in case of Indian culture, if we take immense pride in the Indus Valley civilization, then we have to go through our religious ways. So we would stick to the strong Vedic Hindu authentic practices. And at the same time they have this notion that societies they will achieve near human perfection if it is not founded on religion, and they hate secular nationalism and the kind of anti-imperialist nationalist view. They don't like it, but at the same time you will see that a communalist and a fundamentalist they differ in many ways. Yeah, there are many multi-religious society, and there a fundamentalist tends to be communal, while communalists are not often fundamentalists. Because you are a communalist, that doesn't mean you stick to the fundamental dictums of your religion. For example, what your text says that Hindu Mahasabha, RSS, BJP, Muslim League, Akali Dal, they are communal parties, but they are not fundamentalist. Similarly, states like Pakistan, Bangladesh, they are communal states, but they are not fundamentalist states. And if I'll give you one example. For example, you will see that the fundamentalists they often they oppose to this notion of development or changes in social practices and institutions, and the communalist can often do favor they do certain reform in certain inherited religions and certain social structures. Uh, for example, when you talk about the caste system, the basic text that we refer to is Manusmriti. But in the Indian context, when we talk, the fundamentalists that refer to a basic text, they talk about the Vedas and Upanishads. Uh, Mostly they will Manu Smriti is perhaps the only text that talks about caste practices and the way it has to be conducted. Yet you will see that hardly there is a Hindu communalist who is completely committed to it in a fundamentalist way, that Manu said this and this has to be done. In fact, except for few handful people don't simply aspire to the dictums of Manusmriti. They fundamentalists would be talking about Vedas, but they don't refer to Manusmriti. So, sorry, if they had referred to Manusmriti, they would have been a fundamentalist. But mostly the communalists, they would be having those kind of ideas, but they will not refer to it as a structure, as an original structure. And if you look at some of the major targets of fundamentalism and communalism, you will see that they make an attempt to communalize people and unite members of one particular religious group under one category, and they try to divide and constant division and fragment communities on the basis of religion, and the reason being that uh, many, you know, first, Not many can adopt fundamentalism in practice. Second, by rigid definitions, they tend to exclude rather than include. So anyone who doesn't believe in the true religion becomes a non-believer. So that is how a communalist and a fundamentalist tries to have their practices together. Yeah. Any doubts or shall we wind up?
So thank you, ma'am. As usual, I don't think they have any doubts. So you don't have any doubts, students? Any clarification from ma'am? Say something, at least say something. How is the
If
class? How do you feel?
others prefer to remain silent, okay, no problem. Uh, Tomorrow we actually have
Chalo.
a lot to cover. So I will be very precise in some of the things, and I'll try to cover the entire block tomorrow because that's the last class we have.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you very much. Thank you, students. So
Thank you,
tomorrow,
sir.
last class of the ma'am. So join for tomorrow at 2:30. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
सर नमस्कार प्रहलाद राउत पाणिग्राही सर अछंती
Wow.
सर नमस्कार
Namaskar.
सर मु मो वाइफ कर बीए एडमिशन करथिल ऑनलाइन सेटा शो करू